kick off and call this meeting to order. Everyone who is on this call, we are so absolutely thrilled that you could join the Central Texas PRSA chapter for our official October chapter event, as well as our meeting. We're absolutely thrilled to have you guys. We're, as you guys know and have been seeing through our emails and through our social media posts, we are doing as much as we can to keep our chapter connected virtually, just as a best practice as far as pandemic is concerned, but trying to make sure that we're serving our members by providing good content and educational opportunities, and mainly too, just networking with fellow professionals. And we absolutely couldn't be more thrilled to have everyone joining us today. Basically, I wanted to just kind of kick off and go ahead and get a little bit of chapter business done. Let me introduce myself really fast. I see, I guess, one member that I haven't recognized in a while, Fran McQueen. Hey, I just wanted to shout out and say hi to you. Do you want to unmute really quick and just introduce yourself in case there's other members that haven't got to quote unquote virtually see you either? Say hi real quick.
Hi, I'm Fran. I'm with the Women's Center of Tarrant County. It has been a long time since I've been able to meet, so it's good to be here.
We're glad to see you. Glad to see you. And I say see because this is just really, really good for us to interact even this way, you know, via Zoom, via virtual opportunities to meet. Welcome. Glad to have you. Really fast, we are going to go ahead and just get a little bit of business for our chapter done really fast. I'm Megan Boyd. I'm this year's 2020 president. There's several other members of our board as well as our directors at large on the call. Thank you everyone for your attendance. The business that I wanted to go ahead and conduct really fast to kick off this meeting is taking a chapter vote with the quorum that we have present on the slate for our board of directors for this next 2021 year. Per our bylaws for the chapter, this information was communicated out on September 21st, which was, you know, basically in requirements of the month advance notice before a vote is taken. It was also communicated out as a reminder with the event for this meeting. And so if you guys want to take a look at that slate, you're welcome to. It is in our invite for this meeting, but I will go ahead and just share my screen so that you guys can see the list of names. But I'm going to be presenting really fast. I want to recognize our nominating committee and the work that they did volunteering for just a second, not to surprise you, Avery, but I just want to go ahead and do a shout out. Avery chaired that nominating committee this year as a service to our chapter. I would just love, Avery, for just a second to recognize you. And if you wouldn't mind just kind of explaining kind of like what that process was really fast. And in fact, I'd love it if you would be willing to present the slate. I'll pull up the list, but if you wanted to go ahead and share the work that you and your team kind of did together on that, I'll pull that up, but go ahead and I'll share the screen if you want to describe a little bit about the work the nominating committee did this year.
Okay, first and foremost, big shout out to Jill because she was a rock star. I'm not gonna lie, I think every one of my emails said that because she truly kept us in line. Anytime I needed any kind of assistance, she, Gary, and I'm forgetting our fourth member. There was 4 of us on this committee. Apologies for that, but yeah. What? Kim, yes.
Was it Kim?
Yes, Kim. Thank you, Meg. Yeah, so the process, we put out a call to the chapter, and Andrea was key in that, getting all those messages across, those emails out. It was definitely a group effort. I in no way want to take credit for this because the group was awesome. Even with the volunteers, the names that were thrown out, kind of the back and forth process. But what you can see on your screen, as Megan pointed out, it's the slate of nominees that we did in fact kind of secure. Everybody agreed to serve. And do you want me to read through the list, or are we good just looking at it?
Just really quick, just do a quick heads up. Is anyone not able to see the list of the slate being shared from my screen? We're happy to read that out loud. And Mia, I think you're muted. Go ahead and say what it is you're saying. Are you able to see it? Is anyone having issues viewing this list? Okay, very good. I'm not seeing any concerns. I don't think we do need to read it, but Jill, thank you for your work. I'm so sorry I neglected to mention you. Avery, if you did want to go ahead and mention, I think you had said you wanted to highlight, I'll take care of the voting, but if you wanted to just highlight this open spot that we have here, yes. I'd love for you to go ahead and say that as well.
Sure. So president-elect for the 2021 year still remains open for nominations. So if anyone out there is interested or knows of someone who would make a good president-elect for, and that they would be serving in the 2022 year, that is still open for nominations if we have any from the group.
Thank you so much, Avery. Really appreciate the work that you and the rest of the committee did. That's an important and recurring service for every chapter for PRSA, and we couldn't continue as an organization if not for the behind the scenes work that the nominating committee does each year to then choose leadership, who a lot of times is also behind the scenes trying to make sure the chapter is healthy and vibrant and supplied with the support and resources they need. Thank you so much, committee, for that. As you guys know, this has been an unusual year. We've had basically our very first experience doing virtual meetings as a chapter. It's something all organizations, whether for-profit or nonprofit, have had to do to keep business moving forward, you know. So this is going to make history for our Central Texas chapter, taking a vote on nominating our board completely virtually. Last year, we actually incorporated the option for some members to vote additionally to our in-present meeting as well as virtually. We closely examined bylaws to make sure that was okay. And we as a board closely examined bylaws as well for the position that we're put in this year. Really quick, I'm going to check chat before I begin presenting the voting for that. Just want to make sure that, does anyone, before I begin the process of voting, have any questions? Feel free to chat that, or feel free to, you know, it's a small enough group that I think that we can discuss this now. Is there any questions from attendance as far as concerns with respect to bylaws, to quorum, or to any questions about how we plan to verbally take nominations and the vote for the board coming forward for 2021. Does anyone have any questions before I begin describing that and that process a little bit more? Okay. So really fast, what we do plan to do as communicated in our message is we're going to, you know, we've presented the slate. I want to make clear that this is the slate that has been prepared and recommended by our nominating committee. This is not the only options when it comes to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for nominations for also the open spot as well as any others, and then we'll move forward from there. So right now, what I would like to do is officially for chapter business, this is the slate presented for our board for the incoming year. In the position that we're in virtually, what we're going to do is just like we would do in any other chapter meeting in person, we're going to ask for nominations specifically for the open spot that we have, president-elect, which, as Avery pointed out, would be a 3-year commitment. Basically, you would be agreeing to serve as the kind of like a VP position, learning from the president, our incoming president, Meg Culler, working with her, supporting her. For example, Meg, shout out to her. You guys, some of y'all, when we were networking before the meeting and you hopped on, saw my 3-month-old son. I had to take maternity leave this year. Meg filled in for more than 2 months for me during that time. That's kind of an example of something that the president-elect would do, as well as helping with programming. We, as a board in the past, have had president-elect spot champion and lead efforts when it comes to programming, but that's a lot for any one person to have to do themselves. So what we have done by practice as a board in the last 2 years that I've been on the board and served, not my idea, just kind of how it happened, is we as a team collaborate and use our ideas and our network, our contacts. For example, our speaker today, basically, we try to see what is of value right now and who do we know that could help bring that to our fellow members. So just want to point that out. I'd like to take any nominations from the floor that anyone would like to make for the president-elect open spot. And I want to point out that the person who is nominated needs to be in good standing, as well as ideally would have been notified either before the meeting or during via chat or anything. Are there any nominations for president-elect for 2021? You guys can, again, feel free to chat those or verbally say those out loud. And if not, no pressure, it's fine. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything above board. I'm going to wait about 5 more seconds, just skimming through chat, making sure. Okay. That's no problem. When I took president's spot, I jumped straight from treasurer to president. We did not have a president-elect. Fortunately, we did have one this year, and so our incoming president has held that position. It's something that I understand according to our bylaws. We can continue to take nominations up until the coming year. And if we do find a candidate either before or even perhaps during, it's something that myself as outgoing president or at the appropriate time, Meg as incoming president could appoint if we find someone who's willing to serve in that capacity. But the board will continue to operate in a completely functional manner without president-elect. It's just it's a hole that we will all fill in as a gap. I do want to, as a best practice, also at this time, take any nominations for any other positions that we do have candidates for, because we are able to take a popular vote with the quorum that we have at our chapter. I'm going to go ahead and ask now from the floor, is there anyone who would like to make nominations for any of the spots for which we're going to be voting in a moment? And I'll go ahead and wait about 10 to 15 seconds for any verbal or any chat nominations that members would like to make. And I do want to go ahead and recognize the fact that in chat, Andrea Gall was nominated by Marlene Neal. Andrea respectfully, graciously declined that nomination. She just says she is not able to fulfill that role at this time, but is honored. And I personally think she would be an amazing officer as far as leadership. She's done an amazing job as our recurring secretary 2 years in a row. I couldn't think of anyone better to nominate. So I'm glad that you did that, Marlene.
I would appreciate it, and am definitely considering some point in the future for sure. So thank you.
And we will take you up. We will remember that. We have witnesses. So we will be circling back around. I think Andrea is an amazing young professional in our industry. And I have the pleasure of working with her on my team directly at Neighborly. So we'll definitely be keeping you in our back pocket when it comes to potential nominees in the future. Okay.
Madam President,
Sir?
I move to accept the slate of nominees as presented.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate that motion. Could I please have a second?
I second. Jill Anderson seconds.
With this motion and second, I feel that we have what we need to consider the slate voted and approved by the quorum we have present of members for 2021. Congratulations to the incoming board, and thank you in advance for the service you're doing for our chapter. Okay, appreciate that, guys. That's definitely a first for our chapter. So history in the making, right? Hashtag COVID first. So chapter business is complete. Please, just as you guys are thinking, if you do think of anyone that you think would be a great president-elect, feel free to email our nominating committee chair, Avery, or myself, or both, whatever you'd like. We're happy to consider ideas that may come to you after this meeting is over. Okay, well, thank you for kind of going through those motions of awkwardly trying to have a vote virtually. I think that we did a pretty good job. That's done. Andrea, our secretary, has noted the passing of that in the minutes, as well as who motioned and who seconded. Thank you, guys. So we're moving past that part. I'm going to go ahead and stop share so we can see each other a little bit better. Let's see. Okay. Just a really quick check on audio. Is everyone still good? Are you guys still kind of seeing each other, still hearing everything okay? Thumbs up on everyone's end? Great. Okay, thank you for that. So what I want to do now is move into the event educational part of our meeting. We're beyond thrilled to have Dr. Moody-Ramirez here as our guest speaker. Mia Moody-Ramirez is the professor and chair of Baylor University Department of Journalism, Public Relations, and New Media. I have her bio here. Some things that really stood out to me is that she's been a part of our community in our profession, joining Baylor in 2001. I am kind of a stalker on social media. I'm amazed at like how networked and how active she is on social media. She's a published author. I know that I personally am really looking forward to hearing her speak on diversity and inclusion. I think that it could not be more important timeliness with everything that not only our industry, but our nation is facing. I also think that it's important that we as a chapter say that this is one small thing that we want to do to recognize the importance of celebrating Diversity Awareness Month. We just couldn't, we felt like this was a perfect time to tap into the expertise that we had as a member with Dr. Moody-Ramirez within our chapter. So I guess without further ado, I do want to turn it over to Dr. Moody-Ramirez. And as soon as her presentation is complete, we will be allocating some time for questions and answers, as well as just some closing business for the chapter to promote our next upcoming meeting. Dr. Moody-Ramirez, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and I'd love it if you would take the floor. Thank you for giving us your time today.
Megan, am I the only one that's still seeing Megan's screen?
I see Megan.
think
You have to unshare, I think.
There we go.
How's that? Much better?
Yeah.
Much better.
I want to see my email. It's a hot, scary mess. So I'm going to go ahead and take that. All right. Mia, I'm turning it over to you, my friend. Please take it away at your leisure. Ready?
Thank
I
you.
was talking to you all, but I was muted. I apologize for that. Okay, I actually double booked myself today, so I was able to go over to the other group for a little while, so that actually worked out well. So I have a slideshow to share with you all. Do you mind if I share my screen at this time?
No, please go ahead and do whatever you need to do and let us know. You should be able to just kind of take share. I don't think that you have to request, so go ahead and do that. Perfect.
Okay, so it says I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so I think I know most of you all, but my name is Dr. Mia Moody-Ramirez, and I am the chair of the Baylor Journalism, Public Relations, and New Media Department. On this first slide, this is just a sampling of some of the research projects that I've worked on previously, and also 4 books that I've published or co-authored with colleagues. So that's just to give you an example of some of the topics that I write about. My research usually deals with gender, race, and media. And so these are the books. The most recent book that I co-authored is titled Race, Gender, and Image Repair Theory, How Digital Media Changed the Landscape. So this book came out in 2018. And the book that came out before that is titled From Blackface to Black Twitter, Reflections on Black Humor, Race, Politics, and Gender. And that particular book actually came out at a very good time. It came out when a lot of, many politicians were, it was revealed that they had blackface in their history. So it was perfect timing. Of course, we didn't plan it that way, but it actually worked out very well. And I was able to get a lot of media coverage because of what was going on at the same time as the release of that book. So today I am just going to talk to you all about diversity and inclusion, and then we will look at some case studies of when it's been done right, when it was done wrong. And I wanted to make this a little more collaborative or discussion based, but I can't see you all. But I guess if you all could just tell me your name and where you're employed really quickly, that would be helpful.
I think that's a great idea, Mia. And
Yes.
really fast, are you able to see the drag box of all meeting attendees as a separate window? I know I'm having to kind of drag it and look.
Where is it? Is it at the top or the bottom?
Let's see. Maybe try Alt-Tab and see if it automatically pulls it up.
Okay.
By chance.
Okay, so now I can see you guys. Thank you for telling me, because
No
I haven't
problem.
used this before, but I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I can see you all.
The only problem now is that that screen is now taking up over top of your slides, and so unfortunately you may have to kind of toggle back and forth. It looks like.
Okay.
I apologize.
So what you're doing, dragging it seems to be working.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
So feel free to
Okay,
do that for you. Like I said, we're all learning as we go with this. So.
Yeah, that's one thing that COVID-19 has been good for. We've all become more flexible.
Isn't that true? And a lot more technology savvy when it comes to the different ways we can connect remotely. Since I'm muted already, I'm going to go ahead and take up your invitation, Mia.
Okay.
You guys already met me. My name is Megan Boyd. I'm a communications manager on the team at Neighborly, formerly known as Dwyer Group, here based out of Waco. And I'm serving currently as president on the board, as I mentioned. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to somebody else to introduce themselves. Couldn't be more thrilled to have you here, Mia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Thank you for inviting me.
I'll go next. My name is Jill Anderson, and I work in the School of Engineering and Computer Science at Baylor University, and I'm serving on the PRSA board as past president this year.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Jill. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I can go next. I'm Meg Culler, and my job is Director of Communications at the School of Education at Baylor.
It's good to see you, Meg.
You too.
I'll jump in really quick to follow Meg up. My name is Avery Green. I oversee the public relations part of our communication and media studies department in Belton, Texas at UMHB. So,
Oh, okay. Great.
thank
Nice to meet you.
you. You too.
I can go. I'm Andrea Gall. I'm also a communications manager at Neighborly with Megan, and I'm secretary this year. We're so happy to have you, Mia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I see they were asking you to serve as president-elect.
I know it. They're the best. They're so sweet.
You're doing a good job.
I'm considering.
Maybe
So Mia,
down
if you
the road.
can talk her into it offline, that would just be fantastic.
Okay, I will. I'll try.
Hi, Mia.
Okay.
I'm Gary Joyner. I'm the Director of Communications for the Texas Farm Bureau here in Waco. I work on the farm and ranch
Oh.
side. We're the state's largest general farm organization.
Yes. Yeah, and what's your title?
Director of Communications.
Okay, so who did you replace?
The irreplaceable Gene Hall was in this position.
Okay, that's
for
what
over
I
30
thought.
years.
Nice to meet you, Gary. We need to connect. We need to develop a relationship. We had a relationship with Gene, so I'd love to have coffee with you via Zoom or one day.
Outstanding. Would love to do that.
That'd be nice. Thank you, Gary.
And I introduced myself. I'm Fran McQueen. I'm with the Women's Center of Tarrant County, actually. So outside the area, but thanks to Zoom, can come in and participate. We have a diversity and inclusion team here internally. And so I'm very interested in this topic and how we can kind of implement some things internally.
Hi, Fran. Nice to meet you.
Shout out, my hometown is Fort Worth, so good to see a fellow Tarrant County person, Fran.
Awesome. Okay, is that it? Is that
Dr.
everyone?
Neal, did you introduce yourself? Who else are we seeing here? It's like a bingo game, making sure we get all our boxes checked on these video face boxes. Dr. Neal, I think that you might be the last one. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure, and of course I work.
I think we might be having some of that audio trouble. Let's see if there's oh, darn it. Okay, I just as host did a quick check. It looks like there might be some feedback coming from your microphone, Marlene. I'm going to unmute you one more time and we'll give that a try again. Okay, I'm going to mute myself. Coming in 3, 2, and 1.
Sounds like a spaceship. Megan, you're muted, I think.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that, you guys. Goodness gracious. Dr. Neal, I'll officially introduce you. Dr. Neal also works at Baylor with these colleagues that are joining us. Most recently, she did our chapter the honor of representing us by being inducted into the Fellows for PRSA National. So be sure and shout her out and congratulate her on that honor. I think that we got everyone, Mia, if you would like
Okay.
to. So sorry about
Great.
the audio issue, Marlene.
Oh, yeah. Thank you all for indulging me. That gives me an idea of my audience and who I'm speaking with today. So thank you for those introductions. So today, as you all have been foretold, I am going to talk about diversity. And so the first thing is when people hear the word diversity, they usually think of diversity related to race or gender, that's usually the first thing that they think of. So if you ask them to define diversity, that's usually what they're going to mention. But as you all probably already know, diversity includes any dimension that can be used to differentiate groups of people from one another, such as ethnicity, gender, age, national origin, sexual orientation, education, and religion. So that's important to keep in mind when you're thinking of diversity. You need to focus on more than just gender and race. And another component of diversity is inclusion. So when people think of diversity, they automatically think that diversity is inclusion, because we've hired people of color, they're here, and we've done our part. But that's not necessarily true. Diversity is just, it's part of it. But it's important to have both diversity and inclusion. So inclusion is the state of being valued, respected, and supported. So, and when you have inclusion in the workforce, you focus on the needs of every individual and you ensure that they have the right conditions in order to succeed. So I like this image here of the puzzle pieces. So with diversity, you have many different groups represented, but with inclusion, they're all included, they're all connected. And so if you have one without the other, if you have diversity without inclusion, then you're probably going to have issues with retention. You're going to have employees who may move on to another job or leave because they don't really feel connected. They feel like they're just the token. And no one wants to feel like they are a token. So that's why both diversity and inclusion are important. And to help you all remember the difference, I have a quote from Verna Myers, and she says that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. So that gives you a good image. You know, just think about being invited to a party and then not being asked to dance. You're going to feel lonely, you're not going to feel included, and you're probably going to leave the party early. And just to take that one step further, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and equality is being on the party planning committee. So equality is probably what we need to strive for. We need to realize that diversity is just a part of the equation. Inclusion is better than diversity, but equality is the best, because not only are you inviting them to the party, you're also including them, but you're also asking them to help you plan the party. So they feel like they have a say in what's going on. That's going to be ideal. So another topic that I like to discuss when I talk about diversity and inclusion, because this actually relates to the workforce, it's unconscious bias. And these are things that we bring to the table that sometimes we're not really aware of them, and that's why they're called unconscious. It may be based on our gender, based on our race, based on our parents, what our parents have told us previously, based on where we went to college. But because of these factors, we have unconscious biases. And some examples would be people's names. So many of you all are in positions of power where you are able to decide who's going to be hired or even who is going to be interviewed. So a 2017 UCLA study suggests that people, when they look at names, if they're looking at applications and resumes, if the names were ethnic sounding, then they would be more likely to put that resume to the side and not bring that person in for an interview. So these are just some examples. You have Deshaun Jefferson, Tanisha Washington, and then you have Caitlin Decker and Hunter Walsh. So, and just looking at those names, people will make a snap decision on whether they want to bring individuals in. So this particular study concluded that white sounding names got 50% more callbacks, and Black applicants with more experience or credentials received 9% callbacks versus 30% for white applicants. So that's a huge difference. There's a huge difference in 9% and 30% of people with the same amount of experience and credentials. And then also, this is another area that's concerning, promotions based on performance and gender. So this is related to gender, and it doesn't necessarily look at race. But a low performing male is 50% more likely to be promoted over a high achieving woman when evaluated individually. However, when they are evaluated together, bias drops and high performance wins. So when companies are looking at applications separately, they would be more likely to hire a low performing male than a low performing or a high performing woman. But when they look at the two applications together, then they're able to make better decisions. Maybe because they're thinking, well, why should we hire this man who has less experience, and we have this other application here of a woman who has, more experience. And so when they're comparing the two together, then there's more equity. And these are some more examples that we might be less aware of. Men are actually hired based on height. So almost 60% of corporate CEOs are over 6 feet tall. And this is in comparison to less than 15% of the male population is over 6 feet tall. So that is a very small percentage. And it indicates that if you're taller and you are a man, then you're going to be more likely to advance into those leadership positions. So tall men move into leadership positions more frequently. And then how women are impacted. Blonde women's salaries are 7% higher than women who are brunettes or redheads. And for every 1% increase in a woman's body mass, there was a 0.6% decrease in family income. So one indicates that women are hired, both of them actually indicate that women are hired based on looks. And one is a factor, the hair, that you can actually change your hair color, but you shouldn't have to. And then the other one, body size, that one is even more serious. Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay, I will keep on going. Another term that you all should be familiar with in the workforce is cultural competence. And cultural competence is the ability to understand, communicate with, and effectively interact with people across cultures. And so this is something that we stress with our students. We make sure that they work on group projects, and they go out into the community and they work with organizations that have diversity within those organizations, because that is a part of being culturally competent. And if you're planning to advance in the workforce and work your way up the ladder, you need to have a cultural competency. And that just means that you're able to work with people from different backgrounds. And also it's important to be aware of one's worldview, develop positive attitudes towards cultural differences, and gain knowledge of different cultural practices and worldviews. So that's why cultural competence is important. Another key term that we hear a lot about nowadays is privilege. And sometimes when people hear that term, they immediately shut down because they think, oh, I'm being attacked because of my color. But it's also important to remember that there are different forms of privilege. So once again, it's kind of like diversity. When we think of privilege, we think of white privilege only. But we need to think of the other forms of privilege as well. So you also have privilege based on ability. So this would be issues of accessibility and independence. I think of an example in our department. We actually had an issue with our elevator last year where it was broken. So the accessibility issue, that actually became a privilege, because if you were not able to walk, then you would have trouble coming upstairs because the elevator wasn't working. Another form of privilege is passing. And so this is the idea of somebody who's able to pass in different situations, whether, maybe it's the woman who's able to hang out with the guys and be one of the guys. That could be considered passing, or maybe it's a very fair-skinned African-American person who's able to pass and fit in different situations. So to some people that would be considered a privilege because you're able to fit in wherever you are. Skin tone is also a form of privilege. Within communities where there's darker skin, and it's not just African Americans, it's also Indians, also Hispanics. There's something that's called colorism. And this is the idea that if you're lighter skinned, then you have more privilege than someone who's darker skinned. So skin tone is also a form of privilege. Class is one that we're more familiar with because that's based on your overall standing in society. It's based on your income. Of course, upper income, you're going to have more privilege. Gender identity is another area. You have sexuality privilege that's based on gender and also based on sexual orientation. So men and heterosexuals tend to have more privilege. And then, of course, religion and faith. If you're living in the United States, Christians tend to have more privilege than people of other faiths. So those are just some general forms of privilege. And there are some that are not as easily recognized. So you have the idea of political privilege, and that can be like if you identify with a certain political group, then in certain situations you're going to fit in better than in other situations. State and military, so military personnel and family have privileges based on the military rank. And then ideological, you have privilege based on your worldview and based on your viewpoints. So those are just some other examples. One thing that's to be noted when you talk about diversity and inclusion is that there are some persistent disparities. And these all go back to the period of enslavement in the United States, where Black people were enslaved. And so because of that, there have been persistent disparities within the African American community. Cycles that build on that history, the history of slaves that once they were free, they were still living under some of those previous things that previous limitations because they were not able to learn to read. So once they became free, it was like they had to catch up in many different areas. And so the disparities persist because you have something that's called bootstrapping, which is the idea of if you work hard, then you should be able to have the American dream. And that's not necessarily true for all groups because of the factors that they're dealing with. And then the other idea is that a colorblind society exists, and that is something that is not true. And we heard more about it, colorblindness, when President Obama was in office. People said, oh, well, now we have a Black president of the United States. So now we're living in a colorblind society. But this was not true because systemic racism and racial profiling often undercut the American dream for persons of color. So we're still dealing with these persistent disparities. Diversity in the workforce. So this is where we get to the content that really relates to you all, because once again, some of you are in leadership positions. And so when you're in a position of leadership, you should strive to have diversity in the workforce, and it is a win-win situation. And I'm going to talk about why it's important to take a look at who has a seat at the table. So all of you are probably familiar with this particular Dove campaign. This was a campaign that featured a Black woman turning white as she used the Dove product and she became clean. She actually went from a brown-skinned Black woman to a white-skinned white woman. And as you all can imagine, this was very offensive to Black people. And this is one of those situations where if you'd had diversity at the table, someone would have been able to point this out and say, oh, well, this is not a good campaign. This is going to offend Black people. But that didn't happen. And it was a huge deal when that campaign came out. One time when Dove actually got it right was the Dove Pro-Age campaign, where they featured women of different ethnicity, different races in their campaign, and they talked about their beauty products. So this is just an example of where they did a good job with their campaign, and they probably listened to women, they talked to women, they got feedback, and they actually incorporated that feedback into the campaign. So this is another example of a campaign that was not very well received, and possibly because they didn't get feedback first. But this was a Pepsi campaign that featured model Kendall Jenner, and she was joining a non-specific protest, and it ended with her handing a police officer a can of Pepsi. But also within this scene, they had a hijab wearing photographer, and there was a placard that read, "Join the conversation." And so this was shown, and this was very offensive to some groups. It was like there was a hodgepodge of a lot of different things going on to sell Pepsi. And this campaign was not very well received. Another campaign, and you guys are probably less familiar with this, but within the fashion industry, we see mistakes all the time. We see cultural appropriation, which is the borrowing from cultures without giving them credit. So this is an example of a Marc Jacobs campaign where it featured a white model walking down a catwalk wearing fake dreadlocks. And so groups, and Marc Jacobs was, probably trying to be creative, but he received flack from this particular campaign. The Black community, they were offended because this model was wearing dreadlocks. So this is just another example of maybe if they had gotten feedback, this wouldn't have happened. Another example is Gucci. They actually came out with this campaign a couple of years ago, or this product line. And there was a sweater that featured the red lips, and then the shoes are black and they have eyes and the red lips. And people thought that this was a case of blackface. So they found these two products offensive. And in the end, Gucci ended up pulling this line. Again, if they received feedback from individuals, if they had diversity sitting around the table, they probably would have told them that this product is offensive. So something else to keep in mind when you're looking into campaigns or you're working on public relations campaigns is cultural effects. You need to remember that relations of domination are developed and maintained not only by economic forces, but also by cultural forces. So this is the idea. I know you guys have probably heard of the word hegemony, the idea of people buy into different ideology, not by force. You don't have to force them into these beliefs. They do it just because they see it as the norm. Well, this is the way it's always been done. This is the way most people feel. And so those are some cultural effects. Some examples of this would be the spiral of silence. And this is where people's beliefs are buried because they feel like, well, if I speak up, people won't like me, or people will think that I'm stupid. So that's the spiral of silence, where they end up sharing similar ideas because people who have different ideas, they are afraid to share those ideas. And then also groupthink is important. Groupthink doesn't allow for different opinions. So if you have groupthink, that's when some of these campaigns are able to make it through without someone saying, no, that campaign is not appropriate because you have groupthink. You don't have that person there to tell you that's not going to fly with some communities. So it's not good to be surrounded by all yes people. You need to have people that have different viewpoints. So diversity in opinions, why is feedback important? Why do we think it's important to have focus groups? Focus groups are particularly important when there is a new product and you want to get the opinion of a group of people. Rather than sending out a survey to hundreds of people, you can have a focus group with maybe 8 people, and they're going to be able to identify some of the things that they think would be an issue with the product. But again, you need to make sure that there's diversity in the members of your focus group. So this is an example of when getting feedback actually worked. So once again, we have Unilever with a Dove product. So they thought this was a good idea. They shaped the bottles of different body sizes that are found in women for their body wash. So they came up with the concept of 6 different body-shaped bottles to celebrate body diversity. But they sent these out to influencers and fans. And in sending it out to influencers, they were able to get feedback. And they told them that they found this type of packaging offensive and patronizing. And so this product never reached the shelves because of that feedback. So that's just one example of, if you get feedback from people, then it can help you from making a huge mistake in the future. So that concludes my presentation. And now I will just answer questions from you all.
Wow, what an amazing presentation, Mia. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
There was
Thank
some
you.
chat going on. I just wanted to let you know kind of while you were presenting, because I know you were trying to toggle with your slides and may or may not have gotten to see all of it. But Avery had mentioned that she's used some of these examples in her classes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but some of these, like, I know myself, speaking for myself, I've seen a few of them. Some of them I had not heard of. I'm like jotting down which ones I want to like read more about. I just because you said you wanted to make this interactive,
Yes.
I'm gonna just off the cuff say a few things that really stood out to me in the presentation,
Okay.
and then I'll be quiet and just let anyone else ask questions. Man, I really like this presentation, and I just each slide that you said triggered like different things that either I've noticed in personally recently, even having a conversation with our child's nanny who keeps our son 3 days a week. Her daughter was concerned about having a conversation with an HR professional in her school district. And basically she hadn't met the person at all. She was worried about, she had some bad news to deliver, having to leave this job, and the person's first name was Peaches. And so she was like, I don't know how to approach that conversation. Like, I don't know. She was basically a very young woman who was kind of inferring and putting fear on, what does that person's name mean? Are they going to be totally different from me? How do I prepare for this conversation? But I just heard from my friend, our nanny, that the conversation was wonderful, and she was very supportive of the employee who's having to leave because of military transfer orders for her husband, and just they left with just an amazing connection, LinkedIn connection, and just wanting to perhaps work together in the future. And so I was like, oh, that's what you said about the name bias. I mean, this person went into a difficult conversation with bias and fear because of just the person's first name.
Yes. That's great that you were able to help her and talk with her about that.
I just thought that was very interesting myself. And just even things that like, you just don't think about every day. Wanted to back you up on the hair, on the hair comment, even just something so small. When I was in news, my news director basically made it a part of my contract. I have naturally curly hair. And so he said that because I had not been hired to be a Hispanic, because I was one of their Anglo reporters and anchors, I needed to make sure my hair every day did not look ethnic. And so I would not be allowed to be on air unless I had straightened it every day, and for consistency and everything. And so I'm not ethnic. I'm French, Scott, Irish, whatever. I don't even know. A quarter German, I think. But anyways, but he told me that I, as a white woman, looked too ethnic, and so that I needed to tone that down. And then I just think, gosh, I just thought that everything you said about privilege in some areas versus others. So that was an area where I was, I guess put into a box. And then myself, I know I had a conversation at a meeting one time where I assumed an elderly white gentleman didn't know what he was talking about when it came to social media. And so when we started our focus group conversation, I was like, well, they made this update with and we find out he knew like 10 million times more than I ever would about like all these social media platforms. And so I just was like, oh my gosh, my own ageism. Anyway, I'm done. I just wanted to say that, like, man, I just loved your presentation. You said you wanted some interaction. So those are some thoughts that really came to me as you were talking.
Yes.
And I want to
that's great.
Everyone else right now.
That I would just like to say that is some great feedback. And that is something that our students tell me, the ones that are trying to go into broadcast journalism, that their hair is a huge issue, particularly for women of color. They are actually told that they can't have natural hair. So if they have natural hair, they have to wear a wig, you know, that's straightened if they don't want to straighten their hair. But I think legislation has been passed in some states regarding hair. So that's interesting that you were told that you needed to straighten your hair for television. Sorry to hear that.
Can I ask you a quick question? And
Sure, Meg.
also, I wonder if you want to stop sharing your screen. We might be able to
Oh,
see
am
you
I
better
still
too.
sharing it?
I think
Okay.
so, but we're all in it.
Thank
But there we
you.
go. Okay. I wondered if you would spend a minute,
Did
a
I
few
stop
minutes.
sharing it? I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Did I stop sharing the screen?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Great.
Thank
I
you.
wondered if you would talk, especially with Halloween coming up, a little bit about cultural appropriation. And I am a person who, you know, thinks I'm enlightened and tries very hard, but sometimes I realize I don't get it. You know, we were watching football the other night and I was like, why is it okay to have the team called the Seminoles still? What's okay and what's not okay? And I think for people with young children, that's really hard to understand.
Okay. Thank you for asking that question. I've actually been interviewed by several publications about appropriation around Halloween. So I think it's just important to remember with appropriation, that's actually stealing from another culture without giving that culture credit. So we see it with celebrities. The Kardashians are particularly known for appropriation, like braiding their hair, that type of thing. And the reason it's offensive for many of the celebrities is because when people see them, when they see Black people wearing a certain hairstyle, they may not like it, or they might say, oh, that's ethnic. But then when a white person wears it, they think it's beautiful. So you think back to Bo Derek, when Bo Derek wore the braids, the cornrows, but we're still seeing this nowadays, you know, with the Kardashians, like they might braid their hair in box braids, and then they get a lot of coverage for it. We also see it with the lip fillers, where, you know, Black women with big lips, maybe they're not seen as being attractive, but then you get white women who get lip fillers and people see them as being attractive. But for Halloween, it's just important. I always tell people the test is, if you dress up like someone and then you knock on the door of a person from that culture, are they going to be offended? So if you dress up like, say you dress up like your favorite basketball player, the key there is, if you dress up like your favorite basketball player, you definitely shouldn't darken your face if the basketball player is Black. You definitely shouldn't put on an Afro wig. So those are the things that become offensive. So I would say it would be okay to wear that person's jersey. But if you have to darken your skin and change your hair, that's when it's going to be more offensive. Because when people open the door and they see this white kid that has on blackface and a wig, they're not going to really think that that kid is doing it because they admire the athlete. They're going to likely think the kid is doing it to mock that person or to make fun of that person. So that's what you have to think about around Halloween. And I even think back to when my boys were younger. I had one of my sons dressed up like a ninja, and I think now I wouldn't let him do that, because, you know, that's part of the Japanese culture. And so now it wouldn't be accepted. But I think now people are more aware of cultural appropriation than they were back then. And so now there's even a campaign that's called "My Culture is Not a Costume." So it's the idea of you shouldn't dress up, like put on a bindi or wear a Indian headdress, those types of things, because then you're dressing up as someone's culture, and people's cultures are not a costume. So that would be the main thing to keep in mind. And so, and then people always ask, well, what if I want to show appreciation? So I think you can show appreciation, for example, if you're going to a friend's wedding and they ask you to dress a certain way, if they're from a certain culture and they want everyone in their wedding party to dress, you know, as a part of that culture, then that would be showing appreciation, because you've actually been invited. You're invited to share in that ceremony.
And we wore saris, for example. I just want to back you up
Yes.
on that. That was what I would.
Yeah, so that was okay because they wanted you to do that. But you weren't going out and selling saris and pretending like you discovered them. So that would have been that would have been different. So I hope that answers your questions, Meg.
Kind of, yes. I think it's very helpful. I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
I've seen somebody selling face masks online that are like stitched like Mexican dresses. And then I thought, is that okay now? They're adorable. I loved them. I didn't get one.
I think back to when we wore Mexican dresses. I don't remember what grade I was in. I was in grade school, but I remember they were very popular. So, and once again, I think that might be different because once something becomes so popular and it crosses over and everyone is wearing it, then that can be different. And I think that's okay as long as people who are a part of that culture are benefiting from that. So if you have people from Mexico selling those dresses and they are benefiting, then I think it's okay. But if you have like big corporations who are coming in, selling these dresses, not giving credit to that particular culture, then that's when it becomes problematic. So with the face masks, I would want to know who's making them, who's selling them, who's going to benefit. For example, if I went to a flea market and I saw a Hispanic person selling those, then I wouldn't mind buying them because I would feel like I'm helping to support this person's family. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. It's often hard to tell. Yeah. Yeah. And
It
I love
is
your
hard to
ninja
tell.
story too. You know, my kids are way grown, but I do think back and think, ooh.
Yeah, what was I thinking?
Yeah, and it's hard to tell too. One of my children was did a history fair project as a Native American, and you wouldn't tell from looking at him, but he's a card-carrying member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. So sometimes it's hard to tell.
Yeah, so that was okay.
I love what you said about the size bias. I think that's something that a lot of people don't recognize even within themselves. But as a plus size woman, it is very evident to me sometimes. And so I love that you brought that up because I don't think a lot of people see that as a bias, and it really truly is.
Yeah, and it's just surprising that it's actually that people have done research on it, and it shows that larger women make less money. So to me, that's really discriminating against a certain group. But the evidence is there that it happens.
So I think my
that
question
mainly
is for
women?
all of us. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask if that research was women or does it apply to men?
Well, for that particular study, they just looked at women. Yeah, but I think it might apply to men, but not as much.
And guys, I hate to do this because I'm really loving the conversation and question and answers. And what I may suggest is that we, if anyone wants to, maybe an email afterwards, we could set up some kind of,
Sure.
I'm loving this, some kind of Zoom where we could just continue talking and visiting. Since it is 12:59, I always want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Okay.
A little real quick bit of chapter business I just want to discuss before we adjourn the meeting. Namely that this meeting is recorded, and what Andrea has really championed trying to do for our members who have been unable to attend is posting those recordings, making them available in our emails that are sent out. And we've even considered doing some things with, social media, posting those, getting permissions from presenters. And I may get offline with you, Mia, and just discuss that as far as copyright and different things like that for your presentation.
Oh, sure. You can share anything. You have my permission.
Awesome. Well, that was easy. Perfect. Love it. Okay. And then I do want to just do a quick shout out for our next meeting, just to let everyone know, please, everyone come. We would absolutely love and spread the word. November 19th, we'll send out kind of a save the date like we usually do, but we will be hearing from Eric Wilson, who is our current Southwest District Chair for PRSA. He's also an associate professor at Kansas State University. And I'm using a cheat sheet here. The title of his topic is going to be Turn and Face the Change, Communicating Organizational Change with Authenticity and Empathy. So he developed this before COVID, but he's, as Mia did, he's kind of currently customized it with the COVID consequences that we're all living with. And so communicating organizational change during this time, be it layoffs that we've had to deal with, be it changes in protocol policies, we think that it's a very timely thing, especially even heading into November when we know that there's still going to be consequences that we're all experiencing due to COVID. So I really hope that you guys are able to attend that. And finally, I just want to thank you guys all for being here. And I'm so glad that we were able to have our slate approved. We'll be communicating out the results to our chapter as well. And with that, I would like to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you guys very much for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you, Mia.